Welcome back. The amount spent by government in real terms on the basic education of children has declined significantly since 2009 and is set to decrease even further. These are the views of Michael Sachs, who is with the Southern Center for Inequality Studies in a research published on Wednesday. Michael Sachs joins us now to discuss this further. Michael, thank you for making time. So as it stands, how much is government spending on these core public services compared to the last spend?
Well, what we did in the research is rather look over quite a long period of time, over the last decade since about 2007. And of course, when you look at the rand amount that government is spending, it certainly has been increasing. The problem has been that the costs that of the things that government is buying to provide the services have been increasing faster than the spending. And those costs are primarily the salaries of teachers, for instance, in basic education, the learning and teaching materials that children need to learn, and the cost of building schools. So all the cost base has been growing faster than the budget. And that is why we say if you put those two things together, the real budget has been declining per learner in the public education system.
And you are predicting that it's going to decline along the way?
So what we are saying, we've looked at the budgets that were tabled, because with basic education, it's really provincial governments that adopt budgets and spend the money on basic education. So we looked at the budgets that were tabled by provincial governments and adopted by provincial governments this year. And if those budgets are implemented without change, certainly we're going to see a very large further reduction on spending on basic education per learner. Of course, on Wednesday, we will have the Minister of Finance tabling the medium-term budget policy statement. And so it's always possible that those budgets could change. But working on the budgets we have tabled at the moment, a further large decline in those resources.
Yeah. We are talking here basic education, healthcare, we're talking the criminal justice, and they account for a large share of the consumption basket of poor South Africans. They are provided largely free of charge to any user. What do you think are going to be the consequences of this spending falling, especially on levels of inequality?
So, as you say, Clement, we usually think about government consumption. That's what economists call the things that we're looking at. But education and healthcare and policing are not consumed by government. They're consumed by ordinary people who use those services. Government is the producer of those services, and the consumer is poor households. So if we reduce that consumption, in real terms, which is what we're predicting and what is implied by the fiscal policy that we currently have, if we do reduce that consumption, it means effectively the real consumption opportunities of poor South Africans is going to decline. And that is going to lead to a widening of inequality, because wealthier South Africans, affluent South Africans, will protect themselves from the reduction in government spending by increasing their own allocation. They will pay for increased private provision of basic education and healthcare and security. And the net result will be a widening of inequality in South Africa, which is already has shocking levels of inequality.
So then I don't see us then, Michael, avoiding a retrogression in socioeconomic rights. Are these choices not at odds with the Constitution?
Well, Clement, I think that is yet to be. I mean, we do say in our view that they are at odds. The Constitution mandates government to secure a rising floor of access to social and economic rights. So to the extent that we are not seeing a rising floor, but an erosion of that floor, a lowering of the floor, that is in tension with what is demanded by the Constitution. The problem, however, is that the underlying economic base of South Africa is being eroded too. So as income, the whole country's income declines, as GDP per capita falls, it's difficult you can't legislate or win a case in court against the economy. If the economy is declining, the allocation of resources to everybody is declining. Unfortunately, the point we're making is that it seems the burden of that decline is being placed, in a significant share of it is being placed on the poorest, and government doesn't seem to be explaining itself and telling us why this needs to be done in the particular way that it is being done.
Yeah. Let's talk about the wage bill. We are always told that it's an unsustainable wage bill and how bloated the public service is. Does your research confirm that?
So we looked at government's payroll, and our main conclusion is, look, we have a large state in South Africa. We employ more than about 1.3 million public servants, and that is big in any metric. However, what we found is that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of government employees are frontline professionals. In other words, teachers, nurses, doctors, and police officers. There are a lot of people that government employs that are not frontline professionals, but we didn't see large evidence of kind of huge reservoirs of unnecessary people within government that can simply be retrenched, and which would enable government to reduce its total employment without affecting frontline services. If we're going to reduce government employment in a meaningful way, that is definitely going to have an impact on these frontline professionals, and we will have to reduce them. So there's not much scope for government to reduce employment without having an impact on frontline services.
So every time they talk about the bloated government then, Michael, what are they talking about? What exactly is bloated in government?
So there are elements of bloating, I think. The staff employed by politicians has grown quite considerably in government over the last few years. There are large number of public servants employed in economic infrastructure services and economic regulation departments like public works, housing departments, and the like. So one might argue that those types of employments could be reduced. However, those types of employments, politicians do need to have some staff, of course, and public works does have some function. Economic regulation is also important. The problem we have is that if we add together all of these categories that we might regard as less important, in total they add up to about 40,000 people in the public service. And if you compare that to the number of teachers, doctors, nurses, and police officers, they add up to about 1 million. So however much progress you can make in reducing, there is certainly bloating in some aspects in the public service and inefficiencies that could be improved. But the amount of the reduction, the amount that you can reduce is very small in relation to the total public service.
Okay. Lastly, how do we negotiate a new path ahead? What's the solution?
So at the moment, I think since 2019 and 2020, government has taken a very adversarial approach to public service unions and wants to force down the salaries of public servants. But the important thing in the public service is not only the salaries, but the productivity of the people who are working there. How effective are the teachers at achieving basic education for the kids? And so what we're suggesting in the paper is that government enter into some kind of social dialogue with the public servants in order to balance issues of pay and productivity in a manner that protects the number of people employed in the frontline service delivery functions. So that we don't, because ultimately there's been a battle in a sense between Treasury on the one hand that wants to reduce spending for very good reasons, and public servants on the other, many of them are probably also under pressure. These are not wrong objectives. The problem is that in that battle, the people who are getting squeezed out are the users of frontline services who depend on a certain number of teachers and nurses and doctors to be available for those services. So we need to place the users at the center of the debate and really negotiate a realistic deal that balances pay, productivity, and headcounts in the public service.
Michael Sachs, thank you for making time for us. Michael Sachs is with the Southern Center for Inequality Studies.